I am Lois Shannon, and I am the founder of the Women's Network. I had a very big business career and was very much feeling like I was in my power with that. And when I had kids and stayed at home for 7 or 8 years, I definitely lost my mojo. I lost a lot of my confidence and so on, which is why I said this topic, I think, is very near and dear. And I just picked up the very end of what you guys were saying, that I think part of it is that some of it's conditioning, and some of it is that when there's something that comes out of you that you feel responsible for, it's really hard not to make that the priority, that we somehow feel like we're supposed to give and be there and do all of these things for our children, and somehow we take the back seat.
I've been working with Lois, building the Women's Network for the past year, and my name is Kenya, and I'm really excited to be part of this conversation because I'm not a mom yet, and I think it's really important for younger women to be having these conversations before they jump into this amazing life-changing journey, and to really have some wisdom from our elders, because I really feel like we don't have that anymore. Sorry, I just called you elders. I'm old.
I can handle it. My Mojo can handle it.
Handle it good. Okay.
Great.
But I think for me, the Women's Network is all about building community, which is, I think, is something that is really missing for a lot of people in their life. And I'm trying to build community in lots of different ways and all different parts of my life. And I think that having a community that can share each other's wisdom based on different parts of their journey and where they've been is really valuable. So I'm really excited to listen to both of you talk about this.
So I'm just going to lead us in what I call the 3-minute breathing space. So in step 1 of the breathing space, we are going to allow ourselves to come fully into this present moment, finding an erect and dignified posture, whether that is sitting or standing, and allowing your eyes to gently close if that is possible and appropriate for you in this moment. And then really opening to your own inner experience. And really asking the question, what is my experience in this moment? First, becoming aware of the thoughts, noticing them as mental events, perhaps becoming aware of the content, and even labeling it, such as thinking, worrying, planning. Next, bringing your awareness to your emotions, particularly noticing any uncomfortable feelings, whatever emotions are coming up for you in this moment. And finally, allowing yourself to feel your body, perhaps doing a little body scan, noticing any areas of tension or bracing, holding. Just noticing whatever is here. And in the second step of the breathing space, we're going to gather and focus our attention on the breath itself. The breath as it comes into the body and as it leaves the body. Noticing where you feel the breath most, perhaps in your belly as it expands and then deflates, the air passing. Maybe you feel it in your chest as it rises and falls. Or maybe in the nostrils itself. And just notice as you bring, as the breath comes in, that is a new beginning. And as you release the breath, a complete letting go. Using the breath as an anchor in this present moment. And then in the third step, we're going to expand our awareness beyond just the feeling of the breath to include the entire body, breathing itself, perhaps noticing your posture, your face, any areas of tension and holding. And you might experiment with using the breath to breathe into those places of holding or bracing. Breathing out from those places and feeling the release and the softening. And you might even feel like it's appropriate to say, it's already here. Whatever it is, it's already here, and let me feel it. And now I invite you to take this new, expanded, softened, accepting awareness into the next moments of our day and to anything else that arises as we move forward. And when you're ready, I invite you to open your eyes and come back and join us for our blab discussion with Sage.
Thank you, Lois.
I do think that that's our biggest challenge, Sage, in mothering is finding those 3-minute breathing spaces.
3 minutes, I know.
I'm so excited to be having this conversation with you. For me, this is probably my hottest topic because having had a very big business career and then having 3 children late in life and deciding to be a full-time mom, finding my mojo after motherhood. I got so lost in that mothering thing.
Yeah.
So I'm really, really curious.
That.
Yeah, I'm so curious to hear from you what your story is and what led you to wanting to really focus on working with women and helping women to find our mojo after motherhood. So I'd love for you just to share a little bit of your story.
So my name is Sage B. Hobbs, and I am a mom of a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old. My 6-year-old is my sweet, sensitive boy, and my 2.5-year-old is my absolutely wild, fearless, independent, definitely a little badass girl. And I have come to do this work of helping moms get their mojo back in a long journey of my own personal development work. I went and got a master's in counseling psychology and counselor education and spent 10 years as a school counselor working in the public schools, mostly in middle schools. So I'd like to say I speak teenager really well. And I'm married to a high school teacher, and we just have a huge passion in our lives for growth and education and development. And after I had, well, there's many things. When I was 23, I had cancer, and that was a huge turning point in my life that I talk about a lot in my work, only because it instilled in me a profound sense of urgency in terms of how I live my life. And I don't think that you have to have your own personal tragedy or trauma or deep challenge in order to learn some of the lessons that you, like Kenya was saying earlier, you can learn from those around you if you're open to receiving that knowing. And so the gift from that experience was always knowing that I was going to make this life count, that it was really important to me to play big, leave a mark, and be responsible for creating a life that really worked for me. And so after I had my little wild child, I love her, I was home for a few months on maternity leave, and I just took some time to really reflect. Like, I've been doing the school counselor thing for a decade, and it was a good deal. I mean, I got to make a difference in people's lives. I was good with all of the emergency and trauma of it. I could stay calm. I kind of loved the dynamic and the fast-paced energy of being in a school. It was 9 months of the year. It was super reliable and stable. And yet I just did not want to go back to that. And so I had to really dig deep and explore, well, what was that about? And really what came up for me was I had something else I needed to do. And I kind of always knew that. I knew that I probably wouldn't do that one path for the 30-year plan that a lot of public educators do, that there was some way in which I had a lot more like creativity and leadership that I needed to get out into the world, some on a bigger scale. And I also got really clear that I wanted more flexibility and freedom to be a mom. When I became a mom, I got so excited to work with women, and I started looking at these like really bright, capable, competent, strong women who were shrinking, like just shrinking. And somebody, one of the women I was working with once said, you know, sometimes I feel like motherhood can swallow you whole. And I thought, oh, that sucks. You know, it's supposed to be a time of joy. And if we completely disconnect from what brings us joy, there's just profound cost to that. You know, there's profound cost to your own vitality. There's a deep cost to your children's well-being and how you want them to learn to live in the world. Like if you want to, I mean, there's lots to this part and we won't go on that right now, but if you want to raise an independent person who eventually leaves your home and can stand on their own 2 feet and like live in the world and be live into their own greatness, you need to model that for them.
Absolutely.
Like, you don't leave your home and come back. You don't go to your yoga class. You don't go out with your girlfriends. You don't go out to your music with your partner. Like, they don't have a sense that that's an okay thing to do.
Right.
So there's a cost to you. There's a cost to them. And if you are in a partnership or marriage, there's a real scary cost there, which is that maybe one day you wake up and you're like, wait, who's that person sitting next to me? Like, wait, what?
Right.
I have a roommate, not a lover.
It's so interesting, the self-sacrificing, that's actually what you're modeling, that everybody else's needs are more important and that you don't matter. And then we want our kids to go out and live their dreams and represent themselves and advocate for themselves. And if they haven't seen someone that can do that, that's hard.
Mojo historically has meant kind of like a magic. So there's like a magicness to Mojo, which I think is kind of cool.
Love
and
it.
the way that I speak about it is your fire within. It's your passion, it's your vitality, it's your sensuality is for sure a part of it. But Mojo isn't entirely, from my point of view, just sexy. You know what I mean? That's part of it for sure. Like sexy and Mojo, I almost use interchangeably, because to me, sexiness is also not about just stilettos and thongs or whatever, you know, but this Mojo and this sexiness is about this fire within, this passion, the thing that's going to fuel you so that when you're in your dying days, you can actually say, like, this was a life worth living. That's your Mojo. That's like, and some people might refer to it as like your life force. You know, it's what gives you your vitality in the world, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, the Mojo piece, when I work with women, and I work with women one-on-one and in group settings and an online program, it's really about first tapping into what does it mean to them. Like if I asked you, you know, what is your Mojo? Like for you, what lights you up? What is the part that brought you here to work with me? Like what is it that you're longing for? And it'll be really interesting because it's not always easy for them to answer. Like they have some sense that there's something missing, and that's what got them to me. But then we have to dig a little bit to really be like, well, what brings you pleasure? What brings you joy? What is that thing that when you do it or say it or be with that person, there's a sensation of deep satisfaction, you know? So the first layer is to really figure that out for yourself, because it really does look different for different people. Mm-hmm. There is, however, one core thing that seems to be the thread that I've not yet spoken with a woman who doesn't answer this as part of their definition, which is confidence. Mm-hmm. So, and you even mentioned it right earlier in this conversation. So that all comes up. Worth, right. Yeah. So confidence always comes up. And, you know, confidence isn't something you can turn on and off like a light switch. There's some exploration that needs to happen there to kind of reignite that flame. There's a way in which we have a mindset as moms that's so outside of ourselves to give and care and nurture that we think somehow that the things we need then become indulgences or luxuries. You know, like, oh, can I go out on a girls' night? You know, it's been a while since I see my friends, as if that's like asking permission of their partner or their universe for some exceptionally special treat. Versus going out with your girlfriend. For me, going out with my friends reminds me of all the facets of my womanhood far beyond my motherhood. Like I'm funny and I can, you know, have huge passionate ideas that I want. My kids don't want to hear about the book I'm planning to, like, that I want to write. You know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, that's cool, Mom. But like all those other facets of your personality, that's why I go with my girlfriends. It's not because I need some little pick me up. It's because that is like an essential necessity for me being my best self.
Right.
Right.
Well, they reflect for us, right? They remind us of who we are. And so when we get cut off from that, we do feel disconnected from ourselves and from our girlfriends. And so I think that's the cost for me anyway. That was a big cost, that I became so disconnected from myself, from others, and mostly from my higher purpose, right? You disconnect from everything in an effort to
the isolation part that you were saying, how we used to do collective mothering. Sorry, I didn't mean to the isolation part is then what happens too. Like where you feel like you're just, you know, I just was speaking at a mom's group in Denver and they were talking about this, right? Like that we all live in our houses. They read some piece and it was like, we all live in our beautiful stone homes, you know, but we're looking through the window like, wait, I miss you. Like, can we do this together a little bit? Like, this sucks over here. There's crap all over my floor. And like, these people don't appreciate me. And like, I need some help. Give me some love, you know? And so, yeah, there's a cost to just your own, there's layers of cost, but you have to identify what that is for yourself so that you know it's worth spending the time and the money and that's it, right? Your energy on that.
Well, I think it's such an interesting, vicious cycle that we get ourselves in, that we don't feel worthy. We don't feel like we have permission. We don't feel worthy to take the time. And so we can't get ourselves out of the vicious cycle, right? Mm-hmm. You have to take some step to invest time in yourself and your self-care and self-love, self-respect to get out of this cycle of unworthiness that causes all of this to happen, right? This cost that you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. But so busting the cycle is the tricky part, right? Like stepping outside of that. And the way that I think that that happens is if you have somebody in your life who calls you out, who calls out your greatness, who says, "Hey, Lois, it's time. Like, you need this," So like with the women's circle for moms that I've been running, people keep inviting they invite their friends, because once they get a taste, they're like, wait, I have a friend, they need you. So you hope that those people who reflect back to you are looking out for you, and that they bring you back out of your shrinking.
Yeah.
And then B, for me, that's where the cost is, right? If you really get the opportunity to look at the cost, most people don't look at the cost. They just think that's the way life is. Like, it's just, I always say it's the blinders. Your blinders are on and you're kind of on the hamster wheel of life. And, until you kind of have something that wakes you up, and it can just be a conversation, like a conversation on the schoolyard. That's been happening for me now that I've stepped into this work. I ride my bike to school with my son almost every morning, which is one of my favorite things to do, and helps me feel a sense of balance, which I haven't addressed balance yet. But and on the playground now, that's become like like, well, what are you doing? What are you up to today? And and I realized, like, even in those small moments, like, you can help people wake up, and they can help you, right? So one mom with her third kid, she had her little baby. She's this lovely mom strapped to her third baby. And she's like, "Oh, I feel so guilty. Like, the baby," it was at pickup. The baby didn't get a nap today because I had to take the other two, this, there, and the other place. I'm just feeling guilty. And she's lovely. And I just looked at her and said, "Why don't you let that go? Your kids have extraordinary lives. Like, they have awesome childhoods. They're being raised in this gorgeous town by the two of you, who love and adore them and send them to this incredible school. She didn't get a nap today. You can just let that one go." And she laughed her butt off. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, you're right. Like, gosh, we get so worried about stuff." And she's just laughing and like, off she went, And it's just like, sometimes you just need those small, if we do that for each other in this idea of the Women's Network and this collectivity, like, you hope that there's enough awake people around you at their moments of awakeness that they can tap into your awakeness. And then when you need your deeper work, you go seeking the support that you need.
Right. Well, and it just is, when I'm listening to you talk, Sage, it's really interesting how hard we are on ourselves, right? And that is so much of I think the getting the mojo back is giving yourself permission to, as you say, let your light shine or have your mojo, because we keep feeling guilty that we haven't done enough, or it's not good enough, or that we're not providing something that we need to for our kids. And so it's a little bit of it feels like sometimes it's an endless bucket, right? That there's just always something that we haven't done right. And so I think a lot of this is around really being kind to ourselves, because that is really the kindest thing we can do to our families.
Right.
For our families, right? Because the kinder we are and more forgiving we are of ourselves, that translates to our families. When we're hard on ourselves, that translates to them too. I think so much of these things go back to our self-worth as women. And I think we've made such incredible strides in especially the American society, where we have been given permission externally for so much freedom. And I think that right now, a lot of the issue is that we don't give ourselves freedom, that our conditioning is such that we have really still held on to a lot of the guilt and somehow feeling that we are less than and not enough, and that we're not doing enough. And that keeps getting manifest and it particularly shows up in the mothering, I think.
Guilt is really not real. Like, there is no guilt over there in the room. You can't point to it. It's not a thing. It's an abstraction. Not to get too philosophical here on our blab, but like, it's an abstraction. All guilt is a pattern of thought.
It's
right?
a thought. Yeah, I was going to say it's a thought. Yeah.
It's a thought, and it occurs differently in each person's head, like what guilt sounds like. So one thing I have them do is listen for their own guilt. Like, what is it saying? Like, when you're feeling guilty, quote unquote, what is it saying? I should really call that friend of mine back because it's been a couple of weeks, but God, she drains my energy and whines the whole damn time. But I know if I were a good friend, I should call her back, So notice, like, what are your repeat on, autopilot kinds of thinking? And then you can start to deconstruct that. Once you can identify guilt isn't real, guilt is manifest only in your own thinking. what exactly is that thinking? And then you can apply some reason to it to break it apart.
I was just going to ask you whether you come into contact much with the whole concept of the conditioning that we get from our mothers, because I think a lot of times the voice, it's really hard to break the pattern. So we're talking about how do we become really present as a mother so that we don't give certain patterns to our kids. Mm-hmm. And then there's the fact that we had mothers, I can talk for myself, who wasn't terribly present, and there were a lot of habits and behaviors that I got from her that I've had to really focus on not doing, right? And the more that I did it from a head standpoint, the more I did them, right? If I was in resistance and saying, oh my God, I better not do that, I was sure to do it. The only way that I could undo it was to become with a lot of mindfulness and a lot of deep work to really understand what was behind the pattern and why I was doing it. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I think there's also the unconscious, I think so many of us go, oh my gosh, I don't want to do the things my mother did. And then
we go, oh my gosh, I'm becoming her. In the next breath, right? And you're like,
if you use those words, then you're in total resistance. And so you're almost guaranteed to do them.
Right. Exactly. It's so funny. It's so true. Yes. Well, that's, yes, that comes up for sure. And I've looked at it, it's actually a whole part of my online program. There's a whole piece around messaging, and I brought in it beyond mothers because I look at it like from the perspective too, like where did you get all your messages about what sexiness means, right? Mm-hmm. Like sexiness and motherhood, that's where my focus lies in this whole mojo and sexy piece. And it's so fascinating because it comes from our moms, but it comes from lots of other sources too, really. Like, there's the media, of course, people always say, but which is valid, but there's also just the people whoever I was around you that you learned from, and now it's also how the people doing it in your peer group are doing. I mean, we're just constantly sort of getting messages around us for what things should look like, as a mother, as a woman, as somebody who has their mojo or their sexiness on, or not. What are all those messages? So those are, like you said, different for different people to what it takes for them to break some of those patterns. And a lot of the conversation that I have are around, I profoundly believe that everybody does the best job they can with the skills they have. That's like a core belief of mine. So we do the best we can with the skills we have. And as a school counselor, having seen a decade's worth of moms struggling, yeah. I just could always tap into my compassion when I could be like, they did the best they could with the skills they had. Like this, and I can help them build their skills, but they love their kid. And this is the best they know how to do right now, right? So I think there's your own deprogramming, like you spoke to, and how mindfulness has really helped you. But there's also a piece sometimes that I really enjoy in coaching around forgiveness. Mm-hmm. And that forgiveness can set you free, and it's, like literally just forgiving the mom for the mom that you had. Like that's the mom you had. She did the best she could. Really, she did. And I mean that, like, even, this is intense, but like, even if she smacked you, like we're not born with hateful hearts. Like and I'm not making excuses for bad behavior, but it doesn't help. It doesn't matter anyways, because we can't control it. Like you'll never go back and get a different mom. You got the mom you got,
I so agree with you on that. But yeah.
So however you practice, there's different ways to practice forgiveness, and a lot of it is doing it repetitively, mm-hmm. Like who do you need to forgive? What do you need to forgive them for? And put your own self on that list because you need to forgive yourself for a lot, And usually, because we make ourselves wrong, like constantly. And if you're in that, you're siphoning all your mojo. Like if you're in a cycle of like self-loathing or self-pity or blame just as much, like that's just giving away all of your mojo, all of your fire within, all your passion and vitality. Like, so it's not like, oh, just get over it, but there's a real power in forgiveness.
I loved what you were saying earlier about the quote that, when women are the most untapped resource, because I've heard so many times that when you educate even just one girl in a community which is not well educated, she transforms the community. And I think that's also true here in some ways when we really think about, okay, like this one woman in our community is stepping up and doing these amazing things, and it ripples. If she really reaches out and says, hey, like, I want you to come with me. It's not just me like doing this for myself, and which I think is a lot of what I hear in your message, Sage. It's like, this is not selfish. This is something for everyone, for our kids, but also for the other women in our communities who really need someone to step up and to do that work. And it's not easy. You know, I hear a lot too about, from what you're saying, about really sitting with the discomfort and then moving past that. And you make it sound so fun. And I love that that's how you're doing that with women. It's like, this is fun. Like, this doesn't have to be really hard and serious. Like, you know, just to observe all of these things and to sit with all of it and then go, okay, I forgive, or okay, like, I can think about this a different way. And so I love that that's sort of the approach you're taking. And I think it's really accessible when you put it that way for a lot of different women and not just moms, right?
Right. Thank you. Yeah, you're nail on the head with the, you know, first of all, it's a collective thing. I want cool moms to hang out with. I want these women to come along for the ride. Like, I want our children to see that this is just the way you do it. Like, wouldn't that be so cool if the next generation was like, oh no, like, the way you live is to make sure you pursue your passions and keep your mojo alive and tend to your relationships. Like, that's just what you do, right? Just like I brush my teeth. Wouldn't that be awesome?
Right.
Well, we have this really cool thing that we've been using instead of like the just do it, we're like, just be it, you know, because I think, again, a lot of what we're talking about is, you know, we're kind of in this doing mind, like the laundry's never done and there's always more things to do. You know, even for me not being a mom, I'm always like, I'm going to bed, I'm like, oh my God, I didn't do all my things or what have you. And, you know, it's kind of destructive. And when I can really sit with the being instead of the doing and just be it, then I feel a lot more whole and integrated and, you know, feel my mojo a lot more. And I can imagine that, you know, that would also be a sort of a great role model for kids too. It's like, because no matter what we do or say, essentially they're going to role model after who we are and who we're being. So
absolutely, they do that whole "do what I say, not what I do" is like ridiculous. It just doesn't work. They do what you do, you know, and that's so pretty. I mean, I love that. Just on that last thought, but you can actually like bend time that way. I know that seems really weird, but I feel like when you just be with your, like, instead of being obsessed with the busyness, and like, I'm a hyper productive person, so I can go there pretty quickly, the busyness thing. But the other day I was about to host a group and I had 30 minutes and I'd like just gotten out of the shower and I looked and I was like, oh my gosh, I only have 30 minutes and I need to put out the, you know, the snacks and I need to blow dry my, and all of a sudden I was like, I have a full 30 minutes. My kids aren't here. Like, I got that. You know, I just like, I paused and was like, instead of feeling like I only have 30 minutes, I just said, I have a whole 30 minutes.
Right.
And sure enough, I was ready with 7 minutes to spare, totally chill. My neighbor walked over to say hi and I was like, I'm ready. But that whole thing of like, if you can pause and be, you actually can.
Perspective is everything. The glass is either half empty or it's half full. It's depending on how you want to look at it.
Right.
When you're present for each of those moments too, you really do completely change the perspective on the time you do have. And so, you know, we've kind of been saying, you know, to a lot of different women, like, actually this saves you time, you know, like you're more efficient if you can be present and really like take a bigger stock of where you are in any given moments. Like you're saying, like, actually I have a whole half an hour, you know, you just made yourself time because you just perceive it in whatever way that we perceive it.
Well, I think reframing is a really big theme of everything we're talking about, right? That instead of feeling like we're being selfish to try and change patterns or to spend time in meditation or taking care of ourselves or whatever, it actually is the most selfless thing we can do because it benefits everybody, right? And so it's really interesting how many of these thought patterns we have that need to be changed, like they need a different perspective on them, and then it changes everything. Right? It changes how we live and how we are with our kids, and so it sounds like, yeah, some of getting our mojo back is just like reclaiming the perspective, the meaning of that, right?
Right, absolutely, and reclaiming that you're worth it, like you always say, Lois. You know, and that you have a lot to offer. I mean, first of all, it's fun to say, get my mojo back. Every time either of you says it, you're smiling. So I like to bring a little bit of, spirit back in.
I love that. I love the mojo term.
Yeah.
I have so much fun using it.
You're like, yeah. And so, I mean, I guess like to leave people with today, just my top 3 things that like come to mind are, it's not an indulgence, it's a necessity, like for your well-being and the well-being of the people you love, and on a global scale, honestly, for the impact you're here to make. And you are here to make an impact. That's a fundamental core belief of mine, that each human being on this planet has something to serve and something to offer. And the second thing is, you can really start looking at, if you ask yourself one question, let it be like, what are my core values? Like, what are the things I want to live by and model for my kids? And start really choosing behaviors and actions that line up with those. And you know what? Sometimes, you said about discomfort, Kenya. I mean, sometimes you will disappoint people. Yes, guilt has to do with taking on other people's stuff, but it also has to do with a fear of letting people down and how you will be seen. Mm-hmm. And the fact of the matter is, really powerful people who live really powerful lives, I don't mean powerful like they run the world, powerful lives like they have agency in their life. They're bowling them over. Right. Those kinds of people who people gravitate towards, they say no. They say no. And if they disappoint people, sometimes they disappoint people sometimes, and they hope that the way that they love them most of the time is enough. They say no with integrity, with honesty, So get clear on your values and start lining up more of your behaviors and your actions that way. And then the third thing literally is just to do more things that bring you pleasure. Like, start there. And that can be free and time efficient. That can be a beautiful glass of wine after the kids are in bed with your partner, not in front of the TV for 5 minutes, just together. That can be a hot cup of tea in the morning and you get up 5 minutes earlier, so that happens on your own. For me, it's often a kitchen dance party. Like, if I have to be cooking or cleaning the kitchen, there's definitely going to be like some Taylor Swift or something on. And that is my mojo. And then my kids are shaking it with me, and but do things that are fun, like consciously choose that fun is worth it. And it's amazing. It does not take much to start a new, like a new way of seeing, oh my gosh, when was the last time I had any fun? So those are just kind of from the more, metaphysical plane of necessity versus indulgence down to like the simple action, like pleasure is your birthright.